But once we started hearing that like everyone was kind of experiencing something similar to this, even like when it was still a secret project, I had people emailing me like every week. And then since the film came out, I mean, I haven't slept since it, since it was released.
I can't imagine.
The tweets, the messages, it's crazy.
Everybody, we are here with Caitlin Keating. You are a producer, you're a journalist, and you are responsible for this story about the Kowalski family being made into a documentary.
Yeah,
correct?
That's correct.
So this film, I watched it a second time on Monday after seeing it at the premiere. I cried more, which I didn't. I was like, oh, wow. I was very surprised by that.
Yeah, I still cry when I watch it.
Such a powerful story. Can you first tell us, like, how'd you find it and what about it gripped you?
Yeah. So I was working at People magazine. I'd spent most of my 20s there doing exclusive human interest and true crime stories across the country. And I was actually doing research for another story when I came across the story in the Sarasota Herald Tribune, which was about the Kowalski family. And every story that I did at People was incredible, but I didn't really see it as a film. And with this, when I heard about the archival that existed, I was also itching to leave. I really wanted to get into documentaries. I remember just going into a conference room because we had like an open floor plan, so I couldn't, call anyone about it in the moment, for something that wasn't for People. But right away, I knew. I went into the conference room. I called the lawyer, Gregory Anderson, who's in the movie, and we talked for like 3 hours. And that weekend, I flew out to Sarasota. I met the family and then quit my job like 2 months later.
Nice.
Yeah, I was like turning 30 that summer, and I was like, I'm turning 30. Like I just want to make a change, and that was it. And 4 years later, here we are. It's pretty wild, yeah.
Wow. Well, you certainly have. This story is absolutely incredible. There's a lot of facets about it. It hits all the things. I watch a lot of documentaries, as does Corinne. Corinne is a film major, so she kind of grew up making films.
I went to film school with the intention of being the next Michael Moore, and now I'm a stand-up comedian, so whoops.
Well, you have more fun than I do, probably. It's fun. I just deal with like dark stuff, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, on this show we do too, unfortunately. Yeah. But or fortunately. There's something really powerful about bringing the darker stories to light to talk about. And the whole, there's been so many instances with this podcast, but I imagine you're feeling it with this film as well, where you talk about an issue somebody's facing. Like, we started the show 10 years ago. One of the first things that happened where I was like, whoa, wait, this is not part of the trajectory of what we were planning, was a lot of people started emailing us talking about their sexual assault. Mm-hmm. And we were like, this is I almost felt stupid for being so naive to how common it was. This was before the Me Too movement resurfaced. And we did an episode where we just read the subject lines of all the emails about women and men who were raped. And it was very poignant. And then the more we talked about it, the more stories we got. So this was, I imagine, a similar.
I mean, from the very beginning. And I guess like also to answer your previous question too, it's like when I read the story, there were so many layers to it. There was so much mystery. And when I even just Googled right after that, like, it was something like, child abuse, accusations. There was like all these news articles of people saying like, I've been wrongfully accused of child abuse. And I was like, wait, what? Like the system is meant to protect people. Why is everyone saying they were wrongfully accused? Like, what about the kids that are abused? Right. So it was like all these layers. And I just started reaching out to all these people. And yeah, I mean, as you see in the film, like the Kowalski family is the main story here. We really wanted to focus on like, one extremely emotional journey. Mm-hmm. But once we started hearing that like everyone was kind of experiencing something similar to this, even like when it was still a secret project, I had people emailing me like every week. And then since the film came out, I mean, I haven't slept since it was released.
I can't imagine.
The tweets, the messages, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I found part of it amusing. I don't think a lot of people would describe the film as amusing, but what was amusing to me about it in a fucked up way was how like hyper vigilant, and I already knew this, but like how hyper vigilant people like to be about protecting children in quotes, because obviously like kids are getting shot up in schools on the daily. Yeah. And how lackadaisical we are about abuse accusations from women, domestic violence. Just, I mean, I've had the cops personally tell me someone has to basically like strike you before we are going to do anything or offer an order. So it's like they're like protecting children from people who don't need protection, like who are already being protected by their caregivers.
Wow,
then taking them away from their families, which I mean, we've had many people on this show, a lot of stand-up comedians come from the foster care system, not surprisingly. And they...
That'll make you a comedian real quick.
The reviews are in and it's not great.
No.
Not good. Not good.
And one of the many ways that America gaslights its citizens is with that exact thing that Corinne mentioned. This whole fake notion of wanting to protect children, even going so far as the anti-choice legislation and Roe v. Wade getting taken away. You don't want to protect children. If you wanted to protect children, they would be protected. You would have maternity leave, paternity leave, and you would have like paid for childcare. Like, what are we fucking doing? So to go over the story for anybody who hasn't seen the film, which you gotta,
yeah, it's on Netflix. Take care of Maya.
It's on Netflix. Take care of Maya. It follows the Kowalski family. Maya Kowalski, and she has a brother Kyle, but Maya was born with complex regional pain syndrome.
Yeah.
And it mostly affects young girls. And I know something that I've learned from doing the show for a decade is that women's health issues are not as looked into because of hormones or because of their hormonal system is different, which is such a joke because men also have hormones. We both have hormones, they're just different levels.
Yeah, exactly.
It's absolutely insane. But we used to have a lot of women email us talking about things that they would go to their gynecologist about. They would have pain and they would just be told it was in their head.
Yeah.
So Maya, how old was she when you guys started filming?
So let's see. She just turned 17. So maybe like 13.
Okay. So
Yeah.
she's just a little nugget.
I know.
She's this
we saw her grow up. I mean, you see throughout the film too. It's like she's a little girl and now she's, almost in college.
And she's much younger in other parts of the film.
Exactly.
Like the footage that we have from her
Yeah,
her
you start to see her because her mother documented everything.
Yeah.
When she was 10 years old. When she
Her
started to
mother,
get sick.
her mother Beata was a nurse. So she understood the medical jargon.
Yeah.
And she took just copious legal level amount of notes documenting the entire experience of Maya's illness. And then her dad, who was a retired firefighter, who's just the sweetest,
the nicest,
kindest, what a beautiful example of a father.
Truly.
It was such a pleasure to watch how he loved his children and how him and Beata interacted. So Maya, Jack is the dad's name. Correct?
Yeah.
Jack and Beata are taking Maya to all these doctors, and they finally found Dr. Kirkpatrick, who diagnosed her right away with complex regional pain syndrome, where I believe one of the lines in the film was like, if you were brushed on the arm by a feather, it would feel like you're getting stabbed by a knife. So
excruciating pain.
Your nervous system is kind of miswired in a way. And so he suggests ketamine treatment. And then ultimately, when that didn't prove to take her pain away, he suggested a ketamine coma but you can't do that in America yet. So he flew down with them to Mexico?
No, it was someone else, one of his colleagues in Mexico. Okay. Yeah.
So
Dr. Cantu,
she was in a coma.
Yeah, for 5 days.
And then afterwards, her symptoms were she was virtually symptom free for a year. Right?
Yeah. I mean, not symptom free, but she was so much better. I mean, you see in the videos, she can't put her arm behind her head before she's in excruciating pain.
Her legs
and then
were
afterwards, dystonia. And afterwards, she was a lot better. So it worked. I mean, there's no doubt about it that she was a different girl after she got back from Mexico.
Yeah.
For about a year. Yeah.
And then, so which hurricane was it that hit Florida? That
Hurricane
Matthew. It was that night where she had to be rushed to the ER.
There's a million hurricanes right in Florida, but it was just common there in the Sarasota area. But she was in excruciating pain, just crying and screaming, and her dad took her to the hospital.
Right, as you would, as any parent would. So they took her to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Pinellas County, Florida.
It's in St. Petersburg, Florida. So they were in Venice, but All Children's Hospital it's about an hour away. But it's they've only heard great things about it. They'd been there before actually, to treat Maya. So they rushed there.
Oh, they've been there. Okay, so that would make some semblance of safety and trust at least with the hospital, especially after going to so many doctors and not having them.
Yeah, and it's a children's hospital too.
Right.
So you don't want to just go to the random ER if you can wait an hour unless it's, an absolute emergency.
Right. And it seems like the turns that started being taken started when they got to the hospital, when Beata got there.
Yeah,
because Beata was working.
Yeah, she was an infusion nurse, so she was out and about at different people's homes. She would go to their house and give them these infusions. And she got there, I think, about an hour later. And she knew Maya's treatment, right? She was, like you said, she was a nurse as well. So she was very educated on CRPS.
Yeah. And the love, like the other thing that stands out throughout the whole film is just the love that these parents have for their kids and for Maya. It was really beautiful. And so I wrote down some of the words that the nurses at Johns Hopkins described Beata as, because like you said, she had a very clear understanding of what helps Maya, and they didn't know, the nurse in triage did not even know what CPRS was.
Well, and I also want to point out that Beata is she's a Polish immigrant, and she has an accent, and I mean I think there's also like in this film like there's a lot of like like kind of like sub issues, and I think one of them is cultural differences, right? So just because like the way like, in America, and this aggravates me, I have, an immigrant mentality, but like just, we have to coddle everyone and fluff everything. It's like, and Beata been through so much more than probably anyone else in that fucking hospital. She comes in with a no nonsense attitude, as I often do. And so, and people don't like that, but it's like, when your child is sick, we don't need to be waving and hugging and shaking hands,
smiles and all that.
You should be pleasant and direct, and that's how things get done. Yeah. And people felt, in my opinion, people felt like she was, trying to take the lead in their area, and life is a constant power struggle. So no one likes that, even if a child's life is in jeopardy.
And when you do feel powerless in your job as a person in whatever area in your life, you're going to take offense to somebody knowing exactly what needs to be done and just being stern about it, I feel. So yeah, the words that some of the staff at the hospital used to describe Beata when she came in that night to meet Jack and Maya were relentlessly demanding, controlling, belligerent, and aggressive. But it doesn't seem that any of those things were actually true. She just knew exactly what to do to make sure her daughter wasn't in pain. And then what ends up happening
also a lot of women on women sexism.
Oh boy.
But I mean, like, even if she was demanding and aggressive,
you should be.
Yeah. I mean, when I've talked to my own mother about it, she's like, I would have been handcuffed right away. Like, Same. I think everyone has that reaction. And since the film came out and I've been on TikTok, like 24 hours a day, there's one girl, one young woman who said, I was so curious about the Polish accent. She's like, I really was curious about it. And she decided to Google it. And there was like all these articles about bias towards women with Polish accents, like just articles just about
sounds
that
harsh.
specifically.
If they language that to the American ear, language, speaking, I know English speaking ear, but specifically American, it sounds harsh.
Yeah.
And God forbid anyone sound harsh or abrasive or any of the other.
But I mean, like, some women have that personality. I can't imagine a woman going in there, like you said,
people who get things done have that personality.
So that's what happened. And she, she knew it worked for her daughter.
Yeah.
And she starts mentioning ketamine, which is, not a typical drug that you hear being used for a 10-year-old. She's asking for really high dosages. Well, that's what they said, high dosages. To her, that was what worked.
Right.
It was the amount that her body needed. There was this conflict.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yes. And the staff was immediately didn't like Beata. They were offended by her, as her lawyer said later down the road. Like, she thinks that, I think what happened is the hospital staff took offense to her demeanor, which is, Jesus Christ, it's her fucking kid. Her kid was sick and she knew what to do.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like, I kind of like recently lived almost exactly this, where my dad was in specifically hospice. And I mean, I just was like, you're giving him too much medication. And I can tell because I lived with him for 20 years. So I know what his general demeanor should be. And this ain't it. And when you pull back, I go, oh, what a surprise. Dad's back. Like, and they got, like, with a power struggle finally worked out, but like I had to be like, no.
Yeah. Like, well, your kid best, your parent best.
Course.
And I think, and that's not to go back to TikTok, but I mean, boy, like this other woman was, she's a medical mom. She said, her kid's like nonverbal. She's super sick and she's never been accused of child abuse. She goes, but today in the video, she was sitting there in the PICU waiting room and she was like, they weren't listening to me. And right away, she's like, I started to shake because she was like, we're a team here, but I'm the quarterback.
Yeah.
I know what's best for my kid.
That's a great way to put it.
So you are doctors, you're very educated, but we have to work together because I know what's best for her. I trust you, but this is like this. We're collaborating here. And she just talked for 10 minutes on TikTok, but never was accused. But watching Beata and what this family went through just brought up all these emotions, because it's something a lot of people experience when they know what's best for their kid or their dad or
and it's scary because like you don't think that you think like, oh, I'm going to a hospital, they're going to know what to do. But I got to be honest, from my own, I've had a lot of medical experience myself, and from my experience with my dad, you really have to do your research ahead of time. It's like buying a car. You got to have an encyclopedia of information that you already did research on, and then go in and be like, be nice about it. Give them a little, like, it's like talking to like a straight guy. Be like, yeah, I'm sure you know the answer, but I think it's this. And go in and be like, I'm pretty sure it's this, because otherwise they're just going to do a trial and error thing where they're just testing you for everything that it might be. And I understand, because listen, when you go on WebMD, almost everything could be pregnancy, tumor, chlamydia, or cancer. And I understand it's difficult.
Right. Yes.
And I don't expect everyone to know everything, but like, you know your body. So I'm like, you have to go in and be like, well, I've eliminated these things, personally.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I was diagnosed with celiac disease, the terminology. No one knew what it was then. Like, Whole Foods didn't have anything with, anything gluten-free. And like for 3 years, we were just like, doctor shopping is what they would call it, just like hospital hopping. Going around, my pediatrician was like, Caitlin, I think it's in your head. You're throwing up every morning.
You were told it's in your head.
So I dealt
eating
with
disorder
that.
over there.
Oh
like,
my
God,
you're
insane.
really skinny, and I was like, I know something is wrong with me.
Yes,
and like,
of course,
my parents were never accused of anything, but it was like,
you weren't believed.
Wasn't believed for years, and finally eat gluten-free after all that. And that was totally fine.
Dude, same thing with me, but only I was fat. Same exact thing, but it was going the other way.
The other way.
And everyone was like,
she was eating lettuce and going on the treadmill 3 times a day.
They were like, I think maybe just stop eating. I go, I gotta be honest, I don't think that's the solution.
I don't want to let go of that lettuce. Stop. That's all I got.
Oh my God, you guys. Yeah, so I know what that feels like at a much different, different scale.
Yeah, and it's like Western medicine, there's so many good things that have come out of Western medicine, but there's also just, it's littered with stories of people not being believed, women not being believed. I mean, the death rate in Black women giving birth is absolutely fucking insane. And then you look deeper into these studies, and it's like there's these biases of like, well, doctors are assuming that Black women, when they're like, they can handle pain more, so when they're in pain,
I did a big
really
story
pain.
about that at People Magazine.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Like, what are we doing here? And there's no compassion. So like when Jack took Maya to the hospital and then Beata met them that night of the hurricane, there was no compassion met with them. And this poor little girl was in pain. And so basically they find out that it's revealed to the staff at the hospital. I think through Beata told them that she did a ketamine coma in Mexico, and that's what really helped her. And then all the red flags started going off in the hospital staff. And it's like, I always try to play devil's advocate. Personally, it's very hard for me because my emotions, I have not yet been able to master my emotions. One day it might happen in my 60s, fuck, what was it? I lost it. So they go in so the ketamine coma, then the red flags go up on the hospital staff, and then they assign a social worker to Maya, and then they just tell Jack and Beata that they can't come in to see their daughter, right? How is it revealed to the parents that their child is being taken away?
I mean, that was a few days later. A lot of stuff happened in between. What's not in the film, actually, is that there was a report to the child abuse hotline that was made, and they didn't accept it. They said, we don't think this is abuse.
No shit.
So, I mean, of course, there's a lot of things that, couldn't make it into the film.
Right, of course.
But, it's complicated. Like, mandated reporters exist for a reason, and they should not be like, that shouldn't change, right? It's like, what's the solution here? What should have been done differently? I think if you suspect abuse, you should call, right?
Absolutely,
I mean, child abuse is freaking real. Like, there's nothing worse than hurting a child. It's just, it's a lot more complicated than that. But so the call wasn't accepted. And then a lot of things happened over the next few days. She was admitted into the hospital. She left the emergency room. And they made another call.
Oh, so she left the ER. She ended up leaving.
No, she didn't. So left the ER to be admitted into the hospital.
Oh, to be admitted.
Yeah,
exactly. Got it.
Yeah, into the PICU and the intensive care unit. And there was another call that was made, and that one stuck. And it accepted.
The call was the same.
There was a few more things that was added.
But that's peculiar to me because there were certain symptoms she had, like dystonia. So they like dystonia, like you can't fake that. So where did they think that was coming from?
Yeah, I mean,
like it doesn't make, like logically it doesn't make sense. Like that. Well, that's a part of the problem is like sometimes I feel like hospitals are using so much medical knowledge that they then stop using common sense.
Yes, yeah,
which is a common trait of smart people in general. You know,
I think when they were talking about the Munchausen's syndrome, which is where Munchausen's by proxy, rather, which is where the mother of a child either fakes an illness or purposely makes their child sick so they can get they're filling some sort of like need, some trauma thing
that we all learned from Eminem.
Yeah. Oh,
you made me feel sick when I wasn't. You know, and I'm like,
I grew up. It makes you sick to your stomach. Eminem's my hero. Anyway. So one of the things that they talked about later in the film was, or somebody was talking to Jack, I think, one of the social workers from that was assigned to Maya was, are you sure Maya's not faking these symptoms to make her mom happy? Because that's the cycle that can happen with Munchausen's by proxy is the child like almost subconsciously realizes, oh, mommy likes when I'm sick, so I'm going to feed her that. And then it's like this cycle that's fucked up. But Munchausen's was nowhere to be found in the Kowalski family. It was because it was simply a real disease and they weren't lying.
Right. And I mean, we all have that a little bit. Who hasn't let a cold go on a couple more days because their boyfriend was finally taking extra care of them? I think we've all done it a little.
Yeah.
Give me soon.
Yeah. Or like, when you're a kid and you want to stay home from school. I mean, I did that many times. Yeah. I mean, the hospital thinks that it was Munchausen. And they haven't wavered from that.
Wow.
And so they didn't think she had CPRS the whole time, correct?
Well, that's debatable. At times, there were certain people that said she had CRPS. It's complicated.
CRPS.
Yeah.
Do you know the stats on that? Like how many percent, like how common that is?
I'm trying to recall how many people I think are diagnosed with it per year. You could just maybe Google it, right?
The little WebMD little stat.
It's not the rarest thing in the world. I mean, it's
right. That's even more surprising.
Yeah, it's actually not that rare.
Well, the other thing is Dr. Kirkpatrick, who I ended up sitting next to at the premiere, and I had no idea he was in the movie.
Wow, yes.
And I ended up talking. I didn't know. I read the People magazine article about the film, but I didn't. I wasn't recalling it when I was talking to him, and I was like, what do you think of ketamine treatment? He's like, well, I have a lot to say about it.
Oh, that's so interesting.
You gotta watch the film. I'm like, oh, wait, are you in the movie? And he's like, maybe. I'm like, huh? And then he came on screen, and I was like, all right, good for you, man.
What are the chances? Yeah.
It is like saying that it is rare, but fewer than 200,000 cases per year. But I guess it's not saying like super rare. So.
Yeah, it's not.
Dr. Kirkpatrick treated 3,000 people in his practice.
Yeah.
If one doctor has treated 3,000 people in his practice alone, that is not a rare disease.
Yeah.
It's not a rare disease. Like,
I mean, it's not like diabetes, but it's still, there's
one doctor.
There's plenty of people calling him every week. I mean, since the film came out, I'm getting a lot of emails from people who have CRPS, who've dealt with the same thing, how long it took to get diagnosed.
And not being believed. I'm sorry. When you're in pain and you're not being believed, I can't imagine anything more infuriating.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the fuck? Like you experience at the hospital. You're like, but I'm vomiting. Like what?
Yeah,
well, I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking the vomit out of my stomach.
Exactly.
You can't do that.
Basically.
So what happens leading up to like her getting taken out of her parents' custody into state custody?
Yeah. I mean, Jack was told he was at the hospital. Beata wasn't there, and he was told that his daughter was in state custody. And that the next day, there would be a shelter hearing, which you see in the film. And they decide based off of Dr. Sally Smith's first report a few days in that there was probable cause. And Deborah Salisbury, another attorney in the film, like everyone has told us, all these experts, that, probable cause, most of the time, like your kid will be taken into state custody if it's gotten to that stage.
Yeah.
So they kind of expected the judge would approve that, and that's what happened.
And it's a very scary the way it happens because, I mean, the Maya is not even really told what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. No one told her she was getting taken away from her parents. And in fact, so she ended up being in the state custody for how many days?
Well, it was like 3 months.
About 3 months.
And she's in the hospital for the duration of this time. And,
she's missing school.
Yeah. So she's placed in state custody at the hospital. That's where she's held.
And did anybody ever tell her that this is what's happening? Did anybody explain to her why she can't see her family?
Yeah. I mean, she says in the film, it was really confusing.
Right.
Like she knew something obviously really serious was happening. She knew she couldn't see her mother. She knew that visits were very limited with her brother and her dad. But she never really got it.
And when her parents spoke to her, they weren't allowed legally to say what the deal was.
Yeah. Beata had really strict rules on the phone.
And there was someone, there was someone listening in on all the phone calls.
Yeah,
so no phone call is actually
I mean,
private.
Beata wrote every question down that she was going to ask her daughter, from literally like, hello, sweetie pie, how are you?
Right.
And when she did bring up occasionally things that she wasn't supposed to, she was told right away to redirect.
Oh my God. The constant the chaperone being like, we need to redirect, mom. And also the chaperone calling her mom, the social worker calling her mom. Like it was so repulsive.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, because the film touches on it, that social worker assigned to Maya, every time there was footage of her, I was like, ugh, she just feels like a witch. She was accused of child abuse. Towards her child, but a child in her care, of like kicking his head or something like that, and the charges.
I don't remember the details of what they say she allegedly did, but the charges were they were dropped, and it was before her time at Johns Hopkins. Okay. But Beata and Jack did find out
through a Google search.
Yeah, Jack said that they Googled her
because didn't feel right.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Those charges were dropped, though, I believe. Yeah,
they were dropped. But Jack says in the film something like, it still put a lot of fear into them that she had been arrested for that. So,
and so in addition to having her child taken away for a reason that's a lie, she's in the hands of somebody who has been accused of something like that. And then so Sally Smith. Oh, Sally Smith. God, I'd love to punch Sally Smith. Just want to say that. She was a doctor assigned to Maya?
No, so she was the child abuse pediatrician.
Oh, okay.
So she wasn't employed. Kind of gets tricky.
She works for Suncoast?
She did, yeah. Okay. I believe that she no longer works there. I could totally be wrong, but that's what I've heard, that she no longer works there.
Which is a privatized company, and I think that's extremely important to point out, because basically anytime there's an issue, whether it be in the medical system, in the prison system, if you do a tiny bit of digging, you realize that it's privatized. Therefore, people are working because of money, not because of compassion, and everything gets fucked up. Like almost every time in America, the problem stems from something being privatized. I would say
it's all profit.
I would say 98% of the time when I read an article, when you get to the foundation of it, something has been privatized.
And while Maya's staying at the hospital for these 3 months, she's missing holidays with her family. She missed Halloween. She missed Thanksgiving. Did she miss Christmas?
She missed Christmas.
She missed her birthday.
Yeah.
She's not in school, which is child abuse.
Yeah, they gave her some type of schooling at one point. Again, that's like really murky, and it's hard to tell exactly when that was taken from her. But basically,
she was tutoring 5 days a week.
No, not at all. And she wasn't really learning anything.
Right.
And she was a really smart girl. She is a really smart girl.
Woman, she's been around the world a couple times. Like she's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, straight, A+ student. Like she's already taken college courses. She's incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, she kind of just sat around all day.
She sat around all day in pain, not getting the medicine she needed. And then she had to hear doctors and nurses talk about how Maya herself was a liar. And then she was told by, I don't know if it was Sally Smith or the social worker that was assigned to her, that her mother was being manipulative towards her. And she was basically told lies about her mother to her.
She told us that people would talk poorly about her mother and her. I'm not sure who actually told her that, but she said that was something she would hear.
So she's just suffering in this fucking hospital. She can't be near her family. She can't be near her friends. And during this whole time, there's all these levels of the court proceedings that have to come along with when a child gets taken out of their parents' custody. There was a phone call where Dr. Kirkpatrick, who was the one who said, let's go to Mexico to do the ketamine coma because I think this is going to work. I love that guy so much.
That's great.
He had a phone call. He called Sally Smith right away when he found out that Maya was in the custody of the state. And he was like, no, whoa. I advised this. It helped her for a year. You need to know that this is not Munchausen's in any way. And Sally Smith did not make any note of that phone call to the courts, which is, isn't that fun? And when she was asked if she had a call or spoke to any of her doctors, she was like, I believe we might have spoken. Like some legal bullshit. Ugh.
And also of note, is that in these situations, Dr. Sally Smith is basically like the only doctor in this area doing these kind of evaluations for child abuse. So it's like, there's always a problem when there's no checks and balances.
Yes.
There's one person who's doing it, who's doing thousands of cases. They're overworked on top of it. I think that's part of, like, if you want to play devil's advocate, like that's the one piece where it's like, this woman's overworked. She has, everyone who's interviewed in the film who'd had experiences with her was like, yeah, she basically evaluated my kid within 10 minutes. And to make a decision that someone is being abused within 10 minutes seems a little hasty.
Yeah, that was the only devil's advocate perspective that I could come up with was child abuse is real and it's prevalent and it exists and it's super common and it's really dark and sad. And I can't imagine how their psyches have been affected. The hospital staff, possibly, I don't want to give Sally Smith any credit for anything, but I can't imagine that she's definitely seen abuse, no doubt. And
for sure.
That has to really hurt your spirit. In a way.
I mean, she's been doing this for decades and she has seen a lot of horrible things. Right. And again, like, this is just Pinellas County, but there's child abuse pediatricians all across the country that are in the same position here.
Yeah.
And
it's a bleak job and it should require a therapist. Like, you should be going to therapy to, like, help you process the things that you're seeing in your job, because there's no way you can be the best version of yourself if you're not dealing with
I mean, like, every state is different. They have different rules. They are, sometimes it's just one person making that decision. Sometimes it's many people. So, I mean, Sally Smith did play a big part in this, but there were a lot of people that that basically ended up making this decision to keep Maya from her parents. Right.
It was a team effort, a team of cunts.
Yeah, it's a system that a lot of people are involved.
And so, and then I'm just writing down, like, the list of, going through my list of things. Catherine Beatty, who's a social worker, who was accused of child abuse, but the charges were dropped, lied to Maya saying that she was going to adopt her.
Maya told us that.
The fuck? And then there was an instance where she described that Catherine needed to get photos of Maya. She basically had Maya take her clothes off, pinned her down to take photos. And Maya was talking about this in one of the depositions, I believe. She was screaming, "No, what are you doing?" Like, that's what a violation. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, do you know if those photos were required for a court proceeding?
I'm not sure, honestly. I never saw them, but we did include that because it was something that Maya said really traumatized her.
This is such a violation.
Oh my God, you just go to, like, CatherineBeatty.com. You just see them up on the website.
And Catherine
you can't trust any of these people.
No, can't trust these hoes.
I mean, Kathy Beatty, like, also recalls what happened, right? So we show both sides to this and this incident through depositions, which is a big part of the film.
Yes, and her recollection was quite different than Maya's.
Yeah, and that's a lot of this story. Yeah. He said, she said. But because they wouldn't talk to us, we made sure that depositions kind of showed their side of the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I think it's like, for someone like a social worker, they're seeing numerous cases. For Maya and her family, like, this entire thing was their life for so long. Mm-hmm. Because of that, I would trust their account more because it's not in a sea of accounts. It's like, when something bad happens to you, you're like, it's fucking burned in my mind. Yes, okay. I remember it like it's pages of a play that I was in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Catherine Beatty tried to take Beatta's phone call privileges away, claiming that they were damaging to Maya.
After one call, she tried that. Yeah.
Go fuck yourself, Ms. Beatty. And the court kept siding with the hospital staff over and over again. So as Jack and Beata are going to these court proceedings to try to get their daughter back, they are constantly being told no, which I can't imagine what that does to your soul and spirit as a parent of a child. I'm not a parent of a child, but I have a dog, and if someone looks at my dog weird, I get pissed. Like, I really, I've said this to you, and I said it to the director after the premiere, and I said it to my good friend, shout out Dan Krystyna, who did the music for the film, which is why I came to the premiere. I was just saying, if that were me, I would have been in jail for murder for the rest of my life. And so time and time again, Beata is denied access to her daughter. Mm-hmm. And then that last court proceeding that Beata was around for was where what was the purpose of that particular court proceeding? Do you remember?
I forgot exactly. They had so many court proceedings. This was happening often. Yeah.
But so she asked if she could hug her daughter. Can I just get in there to hug my daughter? And she was
her daughter was at the courthouse that day. Maya had to go in, and I forgot why she had to be there. I think she was getting some type of psychological evaluation. I could be wrong, but she was at the courthouse. So Beata knew that Maya was in the same building, and that's why she asked. She didn't ask to go to the hospital and hug her.
She just asked to go
and
to
the judge is like, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. And I mean, also I think to point out like why the hospital kept getting chosen, like it's kind of discussed in various points throughout the film how like these hospitals just, and in case anyone doesn't know, get sued constantly, right? And I mean, sometimes for a real reason, and then sometimes obviously just people trying to get money out of them. But I mean, they are well prepared to get sued, so they're legaled up. And just like everything else, like the court system is extremely incestuous. So it's like, like the judges, the lawyers, everyone, they already have like these pre-existing relationships with one another, and you're going to prioritize your friends. So already, I feel like when you're suing, like when you're an individual family or person trying to fight the establishment that is a hospital, you're already going in and things are very uneven.
Uphill battle.
Yeah, so
100%.
like because I mean, like, yeah, this is the hospital's not like, oh my God, we're being sued. They're like, we have another lawsuit. Let's add it to the pile.
Yeah. And so you have her denied being allowed to hug her daughter who's in a nearby room, and then that broke Beata. That just when her and her husband Jack, oh God, this poor couple. Like, I just can't imagine what that does to a relationship when Beata is emotional, and I just so identify with her and how her emotions are very strong, and it's harder for her to contain them. Although the footage that was shown of her, the phone calls that were played from her, she was calm as hell. I'm like, you think that's belligerent? I'll show you fucking belligerent. Like, that's crazy to me. And it's crazy making. When you gaslight somebody, you are slowly chipping away at their soul. And the unfortunate consequence of the gaslighting of Beata was that her daughter, she wasn't allowed to see her daughter, who she loved more than anything. And it broke her. It broke her, and she took her own life. And that part was, I understood why she did that, because her husband, I know that her husband Jack was very like angry with her, and there's so many layers to it. But when they were fighting, and Jack was like, you gotta be calm, you gotta be, I totally knew. I was fighting with my boyfriend, not fighting, but we were talking about this when I watched it a second time. I was like, fuck, she doesn't have to be calm. And he was like, yes, she does. Like, he's trying to get his kid back. Like, and she's not helping. I'm like, but her kid got taken away and no one is giving her compassion.
They had different strategies.
Yeah,
totally.
Everyone has their own strategy. I think like a lot of parents we talked to said, before this happened to us, you'd think that you'd be screaming and getting yourself arrested, because you're so upset that your child's taken from you. But once your child is taken from you, you're only going to hurt your case by causing a scene. So I think until it happens to you, there's no way to really know how you would react.
Of course.
But I think that's what Jack thought. Jack said a good strategy. That, it was just, let's not ruffle any more feathers here. Let's just be calm. And that's probably going to be the fastest way to get Maya back.
The fastest for sure. But I think it also will like not create change. So like, obviously no one wanted it so that Beata ends up dead. But I think like, in a weird way, I understand, let's call it, her taking her own life, a strategy in a way, because the story, I mean, I think wouldn't have gotten the attention that it did if she had not done that. And so it's like she sacrificed herself in a weird way for like the greater good of not only her family, but a lot of families experiencing the same thing, because all the additional people who went through the same experience who are interviewed later in the film in the series of Talking Heads, they're like, well, we kind of just went along with it. And like, you basically need, into it, not always like your life, but you have to sacrifice yourself in some way many times if you're the first person to create change in something that's been going on systemically for such a long time. And additionally, it reminded me of this story that went viral on TikTok very recently. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. The Kasanoff family, who are two lawyers, and a very similar thing happened where they were both lawyers, but the mom had kind of stopped practicing a little bit earlier to take care of her family, her children. And the dad was a very prominent lawyer, and they weren't getting along. And so he did that thing where parents use the kids as pawns against each other in like an ongoing divorce. The mom also had cancer that ended up being terminal. But I think his name is Alan. He ended up getting the children taken away from her. She was already had cancer. She hadn't seen the kids in months, and she also writes this letter and ends up going to Europe, where they have legal assisted suicide, and very, very, very similar to Beata, because she's like, well, but the only thing the difference was like she was dying anyway, but she was like, I haven't seen my children in months. There is no hope. My husband has taken them away from me. I have no power. She had the extensive notes the same way Beata did. And she was just like, the life is truly not worth living anymore. And, she had uploaded all this information that she had collected over the years, like her own case, basically in a cloud, like the cloud. And she put the link with her suicide note, like on Facebook or something. So then it went viral, and everyone started looking through the pages and pages of documentation. But I was like, there are so many similarities between these cases.
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't heard about that story.
Yeah.
Go wild on TikTok, baby. It's a TikTok story.
I mean, suicides are really, you're never really going to know all the reasons why. I think personally, it's not just one thing that happens. But I think you see in the film, we're not,
Catwoman was up against a lot.
Cannot say why this happened, but you do see her pretty devastated, obviously,
and she has no
in the
allies
hours before.
Yeah, and it's like, and I totally understand her husband's strategy, and I think that is the right one for a lot of reasons in terms of like getting the kid back, and with
and the parent advocate you hear from too, the woman who's talking to her,
and she was very real with Beata.
Yeah, because that woman has seen this happen many times before, and she was like, you just have to just do what they say.
Yeah,
get your kid out of there and never go back. And
it's like, do you want justice, or do you just want this like short term correct outcome? I mean, and I think it's almost like Beata was like fighting for like a larger cause.
Well, and so after she takes her own life because her daughter was taken away from her because she was accused of Munchausen's, because the CPRS was allegedly fake, even though some doctors at Johns Hopkins said, well, no, she does have it. The whole point of Maya getting taken away was she's being abused. She's being abused by Munchausen's, or the ketamine thing is abused, whatever. And then shortly after Beata takes her own life, they have another court hearing, or they allow Jack to take Maya to another doctor who diagnoses her with CPRS, and she's fucking back in her dad's custody. How long after the suicide of her mother?
Within like a week or two.
Within a fucking week. Okay. So
I think but I think it's because the pacing was because of the lost life.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that would have happened had
that's the thing.
Yeah. So
if Beata didn't kill herself.
Yeah. No, it's fucking crazy.
And then there's so many fucking layers.
Well, and then there's the text exchange in the film that's, I'm going to not be too judgmental about the callousness of the texts between the doctors and social workers, because if anyone read comedian texts, we would all be sent to a mental evaluation.
Yeah, I don't want anyone seeing my text messages.
Right, exactly. No. But in the text exchange, they're saying like, they're kind of like almost like they know they fucked up because someone is now dead, but they're trying to make each other feel better by saying like, oh, well, we obviously did the right thing by taking Maya away from her family, because they're almost like, this bitch is crazy. Obviously, she just took her own life. That's not what they're saying, but they might as well have said that. And then they reveal in the text message exchange that this is the second time this has happened, that they have lost someone to suicide. And then you're going, oh, holy shit, this is such, it's a larger problem, but it's just level by level revealed what a much larger problem it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the details into like who that was or anything, but I do know when we saw those text messages, we thought that was just, it was part of their side of the story.
Was that something that you guys got as part of the documentary team? Was that part of the legal case? Like, how did you get access? I mean, I know like in court you get access to text messages, but I was curious how.
Yeah, I mean, it's public record. So,
documentary filmmakers have access to it?
Yeah, I mean, most of it, and also through the attorneys. I mean, everything in the film, we obviously were allowed to use, and it was stuff that had been given as evidence and put on the public docket. So all of that stuff wasn't like confidential.
Text messages are only public record if you're being like take it to, I'm like, I can't look at my ex-boyfriends, can I?
No, I know that would be.
Fucking wish. You wouldn't see me for a while.
The wheels started turning. I go,
I have seen some of those messages that I have a lot of regrets. Sometimes you just wish you didn't see something,
Right.
Oh, boy, do I ever.
Common theme on this show.
That's another episode. But what was I saying?
The access.
You have access to the text.
I mean, the plaintiff, so the Kowalski's attorneys, they wanted their text exchanges, and they got some of them, so we were able to see that.
So
fascinating.
In addition to Maya's mother killing herself, and Maya never getting to see her mother ever again, and then getting released back to her her one remaining parent's custody a week later, the hospital the whole time was billing Maya's insurance for the disease that they claimed she didn't have. So she was billed for about 3 months treatment of CRPS, which is the whole point of her being taken away was the CRPS was fake. So that to me was like, because, the whole time in this documentary, up until that point, I was like, why is this happening? I don't get it. People aren't just like evil. Why is this happening? I really don't believe people are evil. They are fucking greedy though. And it's the money. It's money. And I hate that it all comes down to money, the privatized hospital, the privatized health services for the kids. And
they're stupid and lazy. And sometimes it's like, if you've already started a child abuse case, you're like, it's just easier not to do any new paperwork. And I honestly think sometimes it is like that because, in a workplace, you become, these people aren't people. They're names on a piece of paper, and that's the problem.
There's no humanizing.
And you saw how, when the her attorney sees the billing for the disease that they claim she didn't have, he looks like he won the lottery.
Jackpot!
He's like, cha-ching!
Yeah.
I love that guy. That guy fucking rules.
He was so happy.
But one of the cool things, one of the many incredible things about Beata, I mean, this Beata should be memorialized in a statue form. Like we should fucking have portraits of her. She's an incredible woman, and she really, I think one of the huge things about this story that I'm just so attracted to is her strength and her perseverance and her grace, even though as she was exemplifying those qualities, she was being told she was being belligerent and demanding. So in a lot of families that have their child wrongfully taken away by the state, they are advised to go with a case plan. Could you explain to us what a case plan is?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's the fastest and cheapest way to get your kid back. It's not that you're admitting any guilt.
Okay.
It's kind of like probation. Where you kind of say, well, I'll comply with what you want me to do.
Okay.
And if I do these things, I'll get my kid back.
And what did you know?
A plea bargain kind of
basically, essentially.
Yeah.
It's not what they call it, obviously. But
Right.
kind
Do you
of
know any of the
you're
things that the parents would have to agree to? Like that?
I mean, in some cases, it's, family counseling, drug testing, right? A lot of these cases are parents who have abused drugs. So there's neglect charges.
Okay.
And they're pretty simple things. They're nothing crazy most of the time.
Beata did not take the case plan.
Yeah. It's actually a little up in the air. We're not really sure if and when they were even offered one, because I think Beata knew from the very beginning, again, because she was a nurse, kind of what was happening here. They decided early on that they wanted this to go to dependency trial. So they said from the very beginning they were going to fight these charges. So I'm not sure they actually were even given a case plan.
Okay.
So
but they made it
I don't think it got to that point.
That ain't the road we take anyway.
They made it pretty clear that was not what they were going to do.
So because of that.
And I'm sure them not taking that also causes bitterness within the people that they're dealing with, because it creates more work
now
that they have to do.
Yeah. I mean, every other family we talked to took a case plan.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not told what that kind of means when you sign one. And what that will do for you, or hold you back when it comes to any potential lawsuits and liability.
Oh, really? That paired with the amount of notes and documentation and recordings that Beata had taken were the reason why her lawyers can fight for they have a case. And there were so many court proceedings that were shown after Beata took her own life, where they were just things kept getting postponed. And the legal system is very flawed, but I understand like there's some like beautiful things about the legal system with proving guilt and innocence and all that stuff. And but like the way court proceedings go, was everything getting delayed because of the hospital's end?
There's
like,
a lot of reasons. And this is also during COVID, so there was a lot of things happening. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like the plaintiffs have wanted this to go to trial for a while, and it finally is September 11th. But we were down there in April when it was supposed to start last year in 2022.
Was that the last proceeding that you guys had filmed?
Yeah.
The one where Maya takes a letter to the judge that she wanted to read, basically talking about her mother and like shining light on her mother's character, right?
And also why she really wanted this to go to trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the judge wouldn't let her. It was a combination of the judge and Johns Hopkins lawyers said, no, you're not allowed to read this.
Because I knew it would tug at heartstrings. They were like, we don't need this. I mean, it was kind of like, it reminded me so much of, you know, the judge telling Maya's mother, no, you can't hug your daughter. It's like the same thing, like this final connection you can have, or like way you can be heard or felt. You know, it was your mother was denied it and now you're being denied it.
It's this weird thing,
Other
though.
people have said that. That is a common takeaway for sure.
I do feel like I understand how separating your emotions from your work is very valuable. In some jobs, it's not. But in most jobs, it is. I think it allows you to do your job better. It allows you to kind of get out of the way and perform. But like, so often we see that when people separate their emotions from their work, there's no compassion. Like, where the fuck is the compassion in the legal system? It doesn't seem like there is any. And so it's at the end of the movie, there's all of these parents that are being interviewed who had their children taken away. Can you tell us like what stories stick out to you, whether they feature in the film or not, that you've received while filming or since the film has come out, that have kind of blown you away? Yeah.
I mean, in the end credits, when you see these like quick Zoom interviews, I mean, I interviewed dozens of people. In all of those cases, you know, the charges had been dropped or overturned, but the damage had been done. Right. And I found like all their stories are just, all those stories were just so heartbreaking. You know, it was, and again, like since the film came out, like not even a week and a half ago, I mean, every family writing me without knowing their background or anything about their case, right? Not everyone's going to be telling the truth, I'm sure, out there. But a lot of people are, and they all stand out to me. I mean, they're all just like, it's been years in some of these cases and they're struggling. Like they lost their job, they lost their home, they lost their reputation, their mugshots in the paper. It's going to be on the internet forever. It's like they all have the same story. It's just like different face, different name, different place. But
have you heard, since the film's release, have you heard from more people who had their children taken away under Sally Smith?
A few.
Wow. Yeah.
Without knowing, again, the details. I mean, the families that you see in the film, not in the Zoom, but like before that, when we interviewed them, they were all at Johns Hopkins and they all had dealt with Dr. Smith.
Right. And then it's an array of sexes and races in the interviews that, you know, people that this is happening to. But did you find any similarities? I was wondering, are they preying on lower income people, or because obviously like you can't tell by looking at someone if they're low or high. But I was like,
but like the amount of money that is required to lawyer up for
it's really expensive. I mean, most people, like in the beginning of the film, I mean, really it affects everyone. We've interviewed really wealthy people really struggling. I mean, the Kowalskis in the beginning, you see, you know, they're on the phone and they have to get a lawyer for the next morning for that shelter hearing.
Right.
What person, most people can't just call a lawyer and, you know, it's not like, oh, can you bill me in a couple of months or a payment plan? I mean, you have to spend the money right up front.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very expensive battle for most people.
And all lawyers are not equal. So it's like you're going up against someone who has great lawyers because they're getting sued all the time.
Yeah. I mean, there's many people who've reached out to me who's like, we can't hire a lawyer because they need like $20,000 down or something like that.
God.
Or more. And, having money, like in many things, right, can help you out a lot.
Yeah.
So
it was really inspiring to just watch Jack love his daughter Maya and his son Kyle throughout this, and just how they interacted. And also, we talked about this once on the show, but like Kyle, what I wanted to, I watched the film sitting directly behind Jack, Maya, and Kyle. And I knew it was her because of the movie poster. That's the only reason. And I was like, oh, fuck, they're right there.
Yeah.
Jesus. And I watched Maya. It was such a unique viewing experience. I watched her read her letter to her mother on film, and she was right there crying, of course. And then I looked over at her brother, Kyle, that beautiful boy. Like, I just wanted to hug him so much. It has to be so hard so the topic that we touched on very briefly, but I've seen some emails and I've gotten DMs about it. I haven't experienced this, but being the sibling of somebody who's ill or being the sibling of somebody who's an addict or something like that alone can be traumatizing in its own right. And so that kid is like, I just want him to get everything he ever wants in life.
Yeah. And it's like, for good reason, people focus on Maya because she was the one in the hospital, but Kyle was home.
When his mom was.
Yeah. And like his sister's sick in the hospital, like you just said. So that's hard enough. You see your parents really struggling. And
fighting. And
you hear him, in that fight. You kind of always hear Kyle in the background, but he was very much a huge part of this story and still is. And I mean, the damage is, there's a lot of trauma obviously there for him and Maya.
Yeah. And I was thinking like one of the reasons like the father, I mean, I can't go in their heads, but just like watching it, why you might be mad is also like, it does feel like, Beata sacrifices in a way her own life for Maya. And then you go, but what about Kyle?
Right. Who needs a mom?
You go, even if you never see Maya again, there is that thought that's like, oh man, but what, you had Kyle at home,
right?
That was a very difficult part to watch, and I don't want to like make him feel bad if he doesn't feel bad about it. No, I mean, I'm sure it's crossed his mind.
I think there's just no way for us to know what's going through someone's mind.
No, you just can't. But then I've had a parent attempt suicide many times, and it's like one of the things it leaves you with is like, oh, okay, I guess, because when you're a kid, it's hard to understand. And it's like the discussion around suicide, thankfully, is getting more prominent, but it needs to be a little bit more common because it's something that
my dad's mom, she took her life when he was a kid. I mean, it's way more common than you think. And
so
but
common.
I mean, it's
we're trauma, comedians. It's literally like a weekly event.
The trauma,
sadly.
The trauma was there the rest of his life.
Yeah. Of course. How can it not?
Yeah. Is there any discussion or talks of like doing a part 2 or a docuseries or something about the families who don't I want there to be
the public is asking.
Because I want to I want people to raise money for these families who cannot afford to lawyer up. That is so fucked. And they deserve all the support and compassion and kindness that they can get. I'm like, is there a fund that we could donate money for them to get lawyers? Or also too, the bigger question, how do you change the system? There has to be a way.
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah. And that's why this film
legislation.
So
I mean, becoming a politician, creating legislation, not getting stuck in. And I think a lot of politicians enter politics with the best of intentions, and then, as is the case, get sidelined by money or, I mean, even these days, fame, which is that's like a weird new level that. Our politicians have become celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think everyone in the child welfare system got into this with great intentions.
For sure.
You didn't just choose this profession to hurt kids. No, you chose to help children.
Sure.
And something along the way has gone really, really wrong.
Yeah.
And it does a pretty good job, helping abused children. But what about everyone else?
Yeah.
So, it's frustrating because the film, we can't answer that question. But I think we can tell these stories and create this conversation that is happening. I mean, it is incredible in the past week and a half since it came out. The conversations around this, people feeling validated and heard, and people really starting to share their stories of going through something really similar to what the Kowalskis went through. So I hope people who are in positions of power can really listen and legislation. I mean, I think it's doing research in your state, what laws are,
That's true.
Because it's state by state, really, at this point.
Yeah. Many countries, really.
Yeah.
What was the filmmaker's decision to not wait until they go to trial in September and release now? Did you just have a wrap date? What was the...
Well, I think with every film, you eventually you have to stop.
Sure.
And it's that big... It's I think any creative person, right? If it's a book or a painting, it's when do you... put down the pen, when you put down the brush. We've been filming for a while.
4 years, right?
I found the story 4 years ago.
Okay.
Started filming, I think, October 2020.
And you were at the Kowalski's house, basically,
We were there. We were, I mean, other families.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, again, you see like depositions, you see a lot of archival. So it was very intentional not to have Maya relive and retell her story. So we used that through depositions. We didn't really spend much time with her sitting down at all.
Oh, that's great for her mental.
Yeah, that was
health.
Very important for us the whole time. Like, we don't need you to retell your story.
Yeah.
It's this, you've already been through so much. And same with Jack. Obviously, as an adult, he could handle a little bit more, but we were very sensitive to that. But we eventually, I mean, we wanted the trial to be in the film. That was the intention. That's why we were there last April when it was then pushed. We were planning, we had booked an Airbnb for a month. We were going to be there for the whole thing. But eventually, you know, we realized like the trial not happening is part of their story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's part of the film.
Has Kyle or Maya or Jack said anything to you about like this experience, like about the reaction of the film, or has any like in any way that it's helped them to heal?
Yeah. After Maya saw it, she said that it gave her closure. And being able,
what a lovely compliment.
She deserves that.
Being
so
able
much.
to have that conversation at the very end when you hear Beata's voice over hers.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, I was like, she didn't know about that prior to her seeing the film, or did she? Yeah,
no, they didn't.
She didn't. I
didn't
felt,
think so. Yeah.
I felt as though
they were not part of the creative process.
Right.
It was so beautiful, so beautifully done. The way that Beata's voice memos were layered over Maya reading her letter to her mother, and to sit behind Maya while she heard that was just, I'll never forget that experience for as long as I live. It was so powerful.
Was that her first time seeing the film?
No, we showed it to them before
privately. I was like, I hope they got a private viewing. Yeah, that's a little intense to experience.
They saw
with an audience for the first time.
Yeah.
But I was like, there's no way. I mean, I'm upset. I have a lot of like niche interests in my life, and one of them is like the afterlife. But I'm like, there's no way Beata wasn't like in the room with them for that moment. It just felt I felt healed for them to witness them.
I mean, I would feel Beata. You know, I never even met her. It's interesting to work on a film for so long and to hear her voice.
Learn a lot about her. Yeah,
to hear her voice every day with the audio and just looking, you know, watching the film like 5 times a day.
Right, feeling
like I got to know her in a way, and you know, they feel that this film, you know, she'd be happy with it. They've said that.
100. Oh yeah. 100%. That woman's a goddamn hero. Does it take a toll on your soul to make a movie like this?
Definitely. Yeah.
How do you manage that?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Because you and the
I don't
director,
really manage it.
I know Dan. Like, I was like, you had to be face to face with the story, and you saw all the footage, and then we only saw an hour and 37 minutes of the footage.
42 minutes. Yeah.
So it was like, oh my god, the amount of cutting down you had to do.
Yeah. I mean, I watched and listened to everything. I mean, that was, you know, I got this big Dropbox account and just
pay for that 5 terabyte storage, baby.
Yeah, I think it's like $12.99 a month. And I listened to everything, and it was really hard. But I just reminded myself, like, it's not nearly as hard as what they've been through, what these other families have been through. But I would find, it was definitely took a toll on my mental health. Probably need to find a good therapist for many reasons, 100%. Not just the film.
Yeah.
It's a long 4 years, you know, and life happens to you during that time too.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with your own personal life and relationships, and it can definitely, it was, now that it's out, I feel like I can maybe take a moment to like focus on me and
get a massage, girl.
Yeah, I know, right? But all the stories I find are like really intense. So
yeah. Right.
You think I would do you guys more and do a comedy or something? Because the stuff I'm dealing with is like, it's important, but it's
well, I mean, it's
stressful.
A toll. Yeah.
That's literally our jobs. Like, I do feel that. Yeah.
On the show, we have our inbox. Like, Corinne went to therapy because of our inbox, because there's people like detailed encounters of like violent sexual assault.
I read like 1,000 rape accounts.
Father.
Yeah. I got it.
Yeah.
I felt like a little nerd going. When the intake therapist, I was like, listen, I know this sounds like a pussy ass bitch move, but I was like, I think I have trauma from other people's trauma.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely have trauma from other people's
trauma. It's a real thing. And that's why people working in hospitals, the folks working at Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital, like, they deserve to have therapy, like, as a mandated part of their job, because there is no way you cannot dance around the fact that it is extremely impactful on your spirit and your mental health to see child abuse and to just see children ill. Like, that's going to fuck you up.
Completely.
Because why does that happen? Like, that's why when something happens to a child like that, when a child's abused, when a child's sexually abused, when a child is sick and dying, it's like, it's so captivating to humanity, because why does that happen? Like, we don't and we'll never probably know the answer as to why that happens, but it's like, that's.
And then when you're seeing that all the time, it's like, you don't want to be wrong and miss a case, right? So the pressure that the Dr. Smiths out there have is unbelievable. I mean, you don't want to say, oh, that's not abuse, and then a kid goes home and is killed by their parent. I mean, because that happens, and there's a lot on the line, but a lot of these cases are really gray, and it's not so black and white, and it's just a really complicated system. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to speak to before we wrap?
I don't think so. We can go on forever.
I know.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
Thank you for making this film. I think you've lit a fire in a lot of people all over the world. So your work, your very hard work, you are going to see the benefits of that until well after your life. Like that.
Thanks, guys.
You started a domino effect that is very potent, very powerful, and it's for a documentary like that to light a fire in somebody's soul is like, that's the best a documentary could ever do, and this knocks that out of the park. Bravo.
That's what we hoped for. You don't want to just make a documentary that's entertaining and then someone moves on to the next thing. It's like, you want it to sit with people, and all the tweets that we're getting are like, what I saw this morning was like, I watched this a week ago and I'm still thinking about it every second. That's what someone said.
My boyfriend and I didn't stop talking about it for like days after I was like, just wait till you see it. Just when you see it, we're not gonna be able to shut up to each other. And there's a lot to discuss.
So first there's conversation, then hopefully change.
Yeah.
We'll follow.
And just the beautiful example I was saying earlier before we hopped on the mics, like we need more examples on the planet as a society of humans, not just Americans, of how to be, like, of beautiful ways of existing. And I think the Kowalski family represents that in so many ways. So if anything, it's not just a documentary that you're going to get pissed or sad about. You're really going to be inspired. So we appreciate your time.
Guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming out. We appreciate it. Guys, watch Take Care of Maya on Netflix. That's the only place it's available, right?
Yes.
On Netflix. You have access to a password even if you don't have a subscription.
Just watch it.
Be resourceful. Come on. You can figure it out for yourself. This has been Guys We Fcked, the anti-slut shaming podcast. We'll talk to you next Friday.